Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Mindful Wealth podcast. Today, we're having a conversation with Kabir Helminski, a Sufi Shaikh and wise person who is the founder of the Threshold Society. Before meeting Kabir virtually for this interview, I got to know him through his books Living Presence and Holistic Islam. One of the things that comes over in Kabir's writing and also in this interview is the importance of the human heart. And he even suggests that we should move, instead of cultivating something called mindfulness, we should move towards heartfulness. So please enjoy the conversation. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Mindful Wealth podcast. I'm here today with Sufi wise man Kabir Helminski. And it's really an honor for me to have Kabir on the show with us today. I actually got to know you a little bit through your books, Holistic Islam and Living Presence. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. So welcome to the show, Kabir.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. So I don't know if you want to, just by way of introduction, sort of walk us through a little bit of what you're doing at the moment, and just let us, and our audience, get to know you a little bit.
Okay. I am in love with the tradition of Sufism. My lineage traces back to Rumi. I've been a translator of Rumi and other Sufis for several decades now. So I stay in touch with a community that's quite, spread far and wide, really over most of the continents, a small but widespread community. And so my interest really is how a teaching like Sufism can help us to develop spiritually, to mature emotionally, to understand reality, the truly real. And if I were to suggest one criterion for to measure our progress in human spiritual development, I would say something like increasing our capacity to love wisely. And that love of language and probing, doing the deep dive into language and how we use it and how we develop a spiritual vocabulary in English today has been an interest to me, because English is kind of not a very mature language for spirituality. It's a great language, don't get me wrong. It's great for many things. It has richness. It draws from so many sources. But because we haven't had a spiritual tradition, let alone a revelation that has come in the English language, it's for us really to develop a glossary, a practical glossary, so that we can begin to use English to talk about spiritual experience and metaphysics. By metaphysics, I mean the big questions, like what are the levels of reality? What is the nature of the self? What is the soul? What is spirit? What is knowledge? What is wisdom? Things like this. So that's a little bit of background. And but above all, I'm a practitioner, a community builder, and also someone concerned with the state of the world.
Great. So I think if I can maybe jump in with the first sort of specific question. So one of the themes that motivates us to do this podcast, Jonathan and I, is the theme of true wealth. And I think we're both frustrated. Jonathan, comes from a financial services background. I'm in the real estate industry. And I think we're both frustrated with the way that the world tends to financialize everything. So we financialize success, we financialize, human relationships. And so we're kind of in this inquiry into what is true wealth. And so, obviously there's some kind of a material component to that. But if I were to throw you the question, how would you define true wealth? What might you say about that?
Jump to the question of true wealth. Well, that's jumping like to the end of our conversation right away. Where do we go after that?
We'll see.
You really want to do this? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to fall back on Rumi because he has written something that addresses this profoundly, I think. Well, imagine somebody has just transited from this earthly domain to the domain of eternal life and true being. And so Rumi says, if a wealthy person brings 100 sacks of gold, his whole portfolio, his equities, his cryptocurrencies, everything, God will only say, bring me the heart. I don't pay attention to you. This is God speaking. I don't pay attention to you. I look to the heart. Bring it, poor soul, as a gift to my door. Its relation to you is also my relation to you. So Rumi is putting the heart at the center of all value. And the heart for us is not a vague, sentimental term about our emotionality. No, it's our foremost cognitive instrument. I believe if any reasonably sane human being, psychopaths temporarily excluded, but any reasonably sane human being were to ask themselves, what is truly important? You can't help but admit that what's truly important is invisible. It's nothing visible. There is no thing. There are no things, ultimately, that really matter, apart from, basic sustenance and basic livelihood and shelter and things like that. Those invisible things that are so precious to us are things like friendship, love, empathy, forgiveness, and I could go on. Intangible idea of integrity. What if you could get whatever you wanted? You could manipulate your way into, controlling your environment, and controlling people, and satisfying all your desires, but you didn't have integrity. What would it all amount to? What purpose might religion serve? And I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt when you say religion that you mean something truly spiritual. So we are here in this world as a soul developing project. We are here in this world, one could say that, and here's an amazing proposition, and Rumi is great evidence of this. Rumi, I think, had one real wish in all the approximately 45,000 lines of poetry that he gifted to the world. He wanted us to know the true dimensions of divine beauty, generosity, intelligence, and love. Now, I don't care if you're atheist, agnostic, evangelical, fundamentalist, whatever. What is sacred to you? What do you hold sacred? If you hold nothing sacred, I pity you for the moment. The true dimensions of true beauty, the generosity of life, the intelligence of life, and the love that human beings are capable of experiencing. What if we were to make that our focus, make those things our focus, to the best of our ability to realize those? Leave aside, afterlives, dogmas, all that stuff. Just put all that aside. What kind of life would that result in?
You speak a lot in your writings of your essential self, right? Not guaranteed by birth culture, not the conditioning we receive, not the roles we play. Is that what you're talking about? Is the stuff that underlies things? And then the question would be, how do we discover that?
I'm not talking about some self in the sort of Advaita sense of self as a cosmic oneness. No, there is that. We recognize that. But essential self is when we remove the veil of thought, remove the veils of desire and emotional reactions, etc. Even remove the veil to some extent of our sensory experience and come to that core of our being that is simply able to witness, but also it's more than witnessing, because I would not propose that witnessing is some ultimate state of being, or that witnessing, even full-time witnessing, is necessarily the most important goal. But let's say it's a tool. And with that witnessing, with that essential self that is capable through simple being to access this domain of qualities and to access all knowledge in a holographic fashion, because everything that is out there is in here. This is Neoplatonism, this is Sufism, this is all the great traditions. We say in Sufism, you are the drop that contains the ocean.
Mm-hmm. I read that.
We would never say, be the drop that dissolves in the ocean. No, we are each of us is a drop that contains the ocean. So the essential self can know that. And how do we attain it? Well, in a myriad of ways, but I think at the core is a practice that involves non-identifying, or I would say stepping back from thoughts, emotional content.
Mindfulness, one might say.
Mindfulness, and could we even go a step further? Might there be something called heartfulness?
Yeah.
And by heartfulness, again, because mindfulness, I think that mindfulness needs to be, if we stay with the term, if we were teachers of mindfulness, we would try to move people toward the mind that's here.
Yeah, right.
Not the mind that's here.
Not the brain, right.
Not
right.
the brain.
Not the brain.
And that we're not talking about some merely mental experience.
Right.
It's more than a mental experience.
It's a purity of awareness. Yeah.
What was that?
It's a purity of awareness.
It's a purity of awareness, but it's also a qualitative awareness. If that awareness doesn't actually melt you in love, is it complete? Or is it just awareness? Is awareness the ultimate goal? I know these are very nuanced discussions, and I can, in a way, sort of anticipate many arguments going in different directions. But let me say something about awareness. Let's not make the mistake with awareness of thinking that if one aspirin cures my headache, 10 aspirin will bring me enlightenment.
Right.
Okay. So yes, awareness is always, a tool.
Yep.
And it's a tool, it's an innate function of our humanity, and it's part of everything that will be accomplished, except I prefer the word presence. To me, it's a little fuller, it's a little bit, it sort of encompasses more and just feels a little differently to me. So I would say that everything that a human being can attain and would aspire to attain will be attained through presence, but there is depth to it. And it's a qualitative depth. And it's not moving in the direction of abstraction. It's not moving in the direction of some impersonal enlightenment, one of complete equanimity, where nothing's ever going to bother me because I am completely aware.
Yep. Yeah, I think one of the great things I noticed in reading your book, the most recent book, Living Presence, was the similarity with Buddhism. And one of the struggles, one of the tenets is you have awakening awareness with compassion. And you use the word compassion many, many times. But so operating in the world, right? We talk about internal and external conditions. Internal, external things. External markers might be material, might be hierarchical, might be social contexts. Some of those internal conditions might be things like mindset or personal drive or awareness or maybe meaning. So given that we live in the world, and these are wonderful conversations, but given that we live in the world, how do we balance these two things?
By not being too invested in the world, by not being overly attached to it. And I mean, here again, too, we are assuming that we are practicing something having to do with the levels of consciousness. I believe it's the movement of consciousness from the sleep state, from the state of obsession to the state of witnessing, that where we get some leverage on the compulsions of our ego. That consciousness itself will help us to not only disengage, but transform aspects of our ego. And that it will also naturally move us in the direction of love as we strip away, our complaints, our judgments, etc., just by seeing them and seeing how stupid they are. Then we sort of, we go to love naturally. It's not as if, because it is the very substance of everything.
Yeah, and I mean, what kind of strikes me, like as we were preparing the questions for this, and I kind of, I read Living Presence again, and it occurred to me, Jonathan, so much of I think what frustrates us with our industries is this compulsive, that there's this level of compulsion behind things. And, when I talk often about the bank account Olympics. I think there's a level of compulsion behind the bank account Olympics, which maybe it's easy, materialism is kind of easy to point at, but I think there's another kind of a compulsion, which is, we're very success and achievement focused. And, if I look maybe, at myself with the things that I've been very attached to, like there's been moments in my life when I've felt very compelled that success or achievement is the meaning of life. And I think that's, maybe one of those traps that we fall into today.
Yes. Great beings and prophets have come and sometimes advised us, very clearly about these things. My own tradition, which is Islamic Sufism, is very integrated with life. There are some Sufis who, by a particular destiny, may be far removed from everyday life. But our models have been people like Prophet Muhammad, who was married, who was a trader, he was a businessman. He was all these things. He did everything that a human being could do in life. And Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, God loves those who work and profit by their work. The son of Adam, and we are all sons and daughters of Adam, that's how we describe humanity, or how the Quran describes humanity. Oh, child of Adam, you boast, my wealth, my wealth, my wealth. O child of Adam, have you truly earned any wealth except what you ate and consumed? or put on and wore out, or spent in charity so that it remained? So he's saying everything is going to wear out, it's going to be consumed, except what we give in charity. And this is profound.
Yep, it is.
And in fact, Muslims are really enjoined to give roughly 2.5% of their wealth in charity each year. I mean, this is what Elizabeth Warren, I think, is also proposing.
Exactly. Yeah. Interesting. Similarity.
Happens to be the same percentage. So, and the point of that, it's called zakat. And zakat means that which purifies. So if you give this percentage of your own wealth, which you have every right to, but that 2.5% purifies the other 97.5%.
Interesting. That's there's an idea in Buddhism, I think it's dana, where it's, you give just beyond the level of your comfort as a training, as a self-development, not as a I'm better here, I'm giving this to you, look how good I am. It's as a training. How do you train yourself to give more? And that's part of the conversation that's missing, I think, in the States, is the benefits of giving.
So many of the practices of religion would be better viewed as training for the ego and soul, rather than as ways to earn heaven and avoid condemnation of hell.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious if we talk about giving. There's a lot of people that have. Is there a right way? Because this is deep in our culture. Is there a right way to pursue wealth that you then would give from? And if you have wealth, is there a right way to be in the world? Obviously, giving 2.5%, but is there more than that to having wealth?
Yeah, this is so important, and it's very practical. I believe that the Quranic dictates for economy and current money would resolve so many of the problems we have in the world today that are problems of a corrupt financial system that is inherently corrupt, aside from the corruption that's practiced through it. As you mentioned, the financialization, the monetization of everything, and the earning of wealth through these games that people play. Essentially, it's a big, gambling casino. And that has destroyed America, is destroying America. We've turned into a big casino. Nothing productive is being done. So yes, there is, I would say, a godly economy, a sacred economy, a possibility of a sacred economy. I learned from a very wealthy person in Saudi Arabia who said, now this is somebody who was really a billionaire, and he said, I can't just go and put my money, in just anything. I have to find partners to invest with. So earning a sort of passive income is considered haram, meaning it's forbidden. Forbidden because when this is, extended across societies, it results in exactly the situation we have today, which is a financial elite essentially enslaving the rest of humanity. Now, this is not capitalism. This is not good business. It's capitalism. If by capitalism we mean capital, if we allow capital to govern our lives, then it will consume us. The dollar will spend us. We won't spend the dollar.
Yep.
This is what's happening. Let's say you invent something. Let's say it's a fast food operation that's going to kill everybody who eats there, but it's highly profitable and efficient, and it puts out of business most other forms of nourishment. I mean, this is a model, this is a metaphor too for the world economy today, because things are profitable in dollar terms, yet destructive to our humanness, to our health, to the environment. That is haram. That is forbidden.
Yeah.
Not by Islam, but by reality. Reality forbids this. We're not going to be able to continue along this path, are we?
Right. We get to a point, and then reality pushes back. And then I think a lot of that, I mean, we see this portrayed in the United States in the political conversation. And while it is interesting, it's the conversation that we have to have spiritually, and it's abducted by politicians with self-interest. And that sort of gets, it gets my goat a lot. I want to listen. I want to say, yeah, this is right. Elizabeth Warren, this is right. And it's also packed with other stuff. And that starts to get, at least in the United States, that starts to get kind of ugly.
Very ugly.
Yeah.
So there are basic rules for conducting ourselves in business or trade. And that is to be honest, not to profit by being dishonest. These things are well known. They were well delineated in our tradition. They've been talked about clearly for 14 centuries.
Yep.
By people who are in business.
Yep.
And in fact, I think I've read from many sources that one of the reasons why Islam spread so widely into Asia, and especially Southeast Asia and the Indonesian archipelago, is that Muslim traders, and they governed trade for many centuries, much more than Europe did, but they had fastidious principles of fairness, honesty, and they were known for this, and they became an example. And that's why you find today, even today, you find mosques all along the coast of Bali.
Right.
It's
an interesting context, because I think religion generally has done that, has tried to bring, we'll just simplify it, call it ethics in business. I mean, it's way more than that, but make it simple. And I remember, this is me in probably 5th grade, going to church. I was at a Lutheran church, not naming names, but I sat in church and I looked around me and I saw all these people that I see every day at school, families that I see, doing business, and I know the stories my dad told me. And I just looked around and saw hypocrites everywhere. People that show up on Sunday to, profess their loyalty to a creed, and then go back to work on Monday and don't live that creed. And that, we signal that we believe, that we do things. How do we actually bring that back to reality? The lessons my dad taught me about business, I don't think those are the lessons that are taught anymore. I think that the lessons are taught are maximizing profit, are, how do we expand our market? How do we, get into new places, create new things, and profit. And I think that's, Terry and I talk about, that's the financialization. That's where everything has a monetary value, and that's all that matters. That's the penultimate. And that's a huge underlying problem globally, culturally, you name it. What are steps we can take to come back? I know that's a big question. I'm sorry. It wasn't on your list.
I know there are people in business schools who are concerned with this.
Yep.
But the predominant culture, postmodern culture, is one that recognizes no true values. Values are considered subjective, relative, and everything is viewed. I mean, all of life is viewed as one power center, exerting itself upon another power center. And all human relationships are viewed as struggles of power and dominance and so forth. And you would think that would lead, I mean, it sounds just, you think that would lead somewhere. It almost sounds like it is ethical, but in fact, it has reduced everything, including gender relations, race relations, business relations, to made everything suspected of being just another, center of power seeking to dominate another. So I don't really, I don't have an answer to this other than we need moral, generous, charitable human beings. We need examples, and they will demonstrate by the happiness of their lives, by the balance and coherence in their lives, that this is a good way to live. Now, we are people who have some contact with great sacred traditions, whatever it may be, Buddhism, Sufism, whatever. But how can we make these values intelligible to people who are not rooted in those traditions? I like the word sacred because it begins to focus us on something of value and what is truly of value. And that's why I also like to say everything that really matters is invisible. If people could reflect on that, then they would see the inanity of, chasing the illusions. They're chasing and seeking to dominate and control and exploit others, and understand the incoherence that leads to.
I wonder if I can just kind of pull on something that's maybe a bit underneath this discussion. One of the themes that comes up a lot in your writing is this difference between, on the one hand, love and connection, and then on the other hand, fear and separation. And I wonder if you could maybe just speak to us a little bit about how you see that animating some of the stuff around us. I mean, if we practice our economic lives from a spirit of love and harmony on the one side, or fear and lack on the other, that creates two different things. If we practice political discourse with, like you said, looking, with love and saying, well, what do you really want? Or what are you really trying to say to somebody who's sitting on the other side of some divide? Or to be like, I have to protect my, my castle and my ideological position at all costs. It's almost as if the spirit that's animating what I'm doing, it might be the same activity, but the spirit that's animating it is different.
Yes. Well, if for people who have at least a certain minimum amount of self-awareness and emotional maturity, we can begin to have conversations with people and, just as I said before, try to understand what it is they truly want and what they truly value, and explore that with them, and maybe be able to share what we truly value and find out that there is some common ground, and respect each other, even if we might have imagine different ways of attaining those goals. But there, at least, we have an honest conversation that is much different than the kind of blaming and shaming that's going on now. In so many areas today, we cannot have a rational discourse about so many of the most important subjects.
Yep.
And add to that the censorship that's going on in social media. And again, I believe there's a rational discourse that we're not able to have now. One day we'll have to have it. about what we've just been through. Right now, we can't have it.
So I know we're getting close to wrap. What I'd like to do, if there's a way to do this, is to wrap on a positive note.
Thank you.
What do you see as a step that we can take, that we can do to enable this? I mean, there seems to be some simple things, I think.
Assume goodwill of other human beings. Assume even goodwill of other countries, rather than demonizing them, rather than assume that they're out to get us.
Yeah.
I know some people would consider this a very naive approach to politics. I'm not advocating being naive. I'm not advocating completely letting down our defenses. But let's have these conversations about human rights, about honesty, about transparency. That's a big one. I'm now talking in the global affairs level. And practicing goodwill, wishing good to humanity, even wishing good to our enemies. There's a beautiful practice. Maybe you've heard of it already, but it's incredibly powerful spiritual practice that I think works on an interpersonal level, and yet is absolutely profound. And it's in Hawaiian. It's called Ho'oponopono. Have you heard of this?
I think so.
Okay. All right. So this
Describe it for our listeners.
Okay, I'll describe it for your listeners. It means in Hawaiian, making the good better. Now, here's the way it works. And this has been demonstrated to actually accomplish miracles. It's been used in hospitals for the criminally insane with absolutely miraculous benefits. So here it is. Every time I'm going to speak for myself, every time I notice fear or blame arising in me in relationship, let's say, to another person, I say internally, I'm sorry. Forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Thank you. I love you. You don't need to say it aloud. You don't need to say it to them. You need to do this work in the invisible domain.
I love it. Thank you, Kabir.
And this will literally transform. It will cut back all kinds of toxicities, and it will result in profound transformation and healing in intimate relation and near relationships, and even, I believe, at the level of societies. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Thank you for letting me see this. I love you.
I think that's it. I think
that's
that's
like definitely your positive note, Jonathan.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Definitely the positive note. So look, Kabir, we're kind of running out of time, but I wanted to really thank you for joining us today and taking this time to, chat with us about the theme of true wealth and how we can import maybe a little bit more, not mindfulness, but heartfulness into the things that we do.
Yes. Yes.
And if anybody wants to either, get in touch with you or learn more about what you do, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, our website is called Sufism.org, SUFISM.org. That's where you can see something about our work. And there are a number of books available. Living Presence has become something of a classic. Another book is called The Knowing Heart. And then there's Holistic Islam, that's a little bit more specialized. And there's a lot of poetry of Rumi and others that we've translated. So that's where we can be found. Thank you for having me. Jonathan, good to meet you. Terry, lovely to meet you.
Okay.
Thanks, Kabir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Be well.
Thank you for watching the highlight reel of this episode of the Mindful Wealth podcast. If you enjoyed what Kabir had to say or you found any of it interesting, please let us know in the comments or go ahead and share it with your friends. You can find more information about Kabir Helminski at thresholdsociety.org. You can also find his books Living Presence and Holistic Islam on Amazon. You can find Terry Shower at terryshower.com. Her book, Mindful Landlord, is available on Amazon. And Jonathan Dio is available at mindful.money. His book, Mindful Money, is also available from Amazon. Thanks again for listening.